Welcome to the CFO Track podcast, where we inspire and educate future finance leaders to help them stay on track to CFO. I'm your host, Tom Hunter, and every week I'll be bringing you stories from some of Australia's best and brightest CFOs and the lessons they learnt along the way. My goal for the podcast is to provide learning and development opportunities for those wanting to get to the level of the guests on this show, but they just didn't have the access to those lessons otherwise. Let's get into it. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Laavanya Pari. Laavanya is the CFO of Beforepay, Australia's leader in ethical lending products. Laavanya made a deliberate move to push her career into fast-moving and often founder-led scale-up businesses. And as a result, it's meant her learning and her career have progressed super fast as well. I know you're going to enjoy this episode, so here we go. Welcome to the CFO Track podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Tom.
No problem. How's the week been?
Yeah, it's been good. We've come out of a good results period.
Yep.
And going through being in a listed company, doing all our results and then having to do webinars with investors. And then we do a bit of a roadshow actually over the next week. So exciting times.
Nice. I saw that result, Q1, pretty amazing. Still riding the highs of that, I would have thought.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a great time. I've been with Beforepay for a couple of months now, but a really nice time to be joining the company where it's just kind of month after month and quarter after quarter of good results. And I mean, part of the reason that I really wanted to join the company was that I could see that it was taking that upward trajectory. So yeah, it's always fun to present good results, I think.
Fantastic. So I've given the listeners a little bit of an intro already to yourself, but it'd be good to hear it from you. A bit of an outline of who you are, what you do, where you're at the minute.
Yeah, so my background is a chartered accountant. I worked at Grant Thornton for a few years before I went over to London to live for a year, as we Australian chartered accountants do. Lived there for a year before I came back. And then have worked through a number of different companies, an assortment of different industries before ending up now at Beforepay as a CFO. And along the way, I've got a wife and two kids. They're 10 and 12 now. So awesome. Yeah, that's my story.
Perfect. Well, we'll get back to the Beforepay stuff in a bit, but it'd be great to go back to the start. So what drew you to accounting, or where did that also come from?
Yeah, so I mean, my mum is an accountant, so that feels like a tradition.
Or corporate.
So she's always been in commercial.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So she kind of did it in a different way from the way that we traditionally do it now. So she worked within a company and then got her qualifications as she went along.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something that of that time period, and you can do that, and you don't always need qualifications. Whereas now you need the qualifications up front, otherwise you don't even get a step in.
And so you went to uni, did accounting?
Yeah. So I thought that I would just do a commerce degree, and who knows where I could end up. But maybe that was kind of always set in stone that was going to end up happening. And while I was at uni, I did a couple of jobs where I did a bit of work in accounting, and I really enjoyed it. And I just thought, again, it was kind of step by step. I never sat at any point and went, yeah, no, I'm really excited about being an accountant. I just kind of ended up in that path. Yeah. And then every step that I went along the way, I just enjoyed it more and more.
Nice. And so was audit always the plan? Was there ever any interest in the commercial route?
One of the reasons why I actually joined Grant Thornton at that point was because you did both.
Yeah.
So you did business services and you did audit, and you got to kind of choose as you went along. And I ended up in audit. So I generally sort of favored audit anyway.
Yeah.
I really like getting out into businesses, and sort of that's kind of continued in my career where I've just enjoyed going into different businesses, different industries, learning new things. I haven't really sort of stuck in one industry for forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think audit really lends itself to that. And also, you know, as much as accountants have a stereotype of not really enjoying people interaction, I think I think across accounting, you have to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
So it's part of the role, and also part of what helps you become a good accountant.
Yeah, agreed. And so you did your time there and then went to London. So new move into industry, new country, that must have been pretty daunting at the time.
I think it was, so I went pre-GFC.
Okay.
Yeah.
a really amazing time to go across. And it was at a point where you could go into an interview. On your way back to the tube station, they'd be calling you, asking you to start the next day. It was a dream time to really be there. And just generally, like, everything was very much on the up. So it was such a great time, spent every weekend traveling, which I can't recommend enough.
Yeah.
Even though London, after living in Sydney, is a really tough place to kind of, like, from the grey skies and dark cities and all that kind of stuff, just being able to get up and go to Spain on the weekend or go to France or do whatever you need to is so much fun. And also from a work perspective, it was a really easy transition into going into commercial because of that, just because of how in demand, especially Australians, were seen as really hardworking in other countries. So they're always keen. And I actually came back before the GFC really hit. So I was back in Sydney for the GFC. That was kind of perfect timing.
Yeah, sure. Any big learnings that you took from that period, from being in London and all that kind of thing?
I think from a personal perspective, I thought it was exactly what you needed to do. I think there's something around the comfort zone of living where you grow up. And especially when you speak to people out of Australia who maybe go to uni or college in other places, we generally, like, a lot of us sort of stay where we've grown up and go to uni from there, or, go like be able to rely on our families a lot, and just being able to get up and go somewhere different, I think is something everyone should do.
Yeah, sure. And what was it like coming back? Did you have any issues reintegrating? I know you're only gone for a short period of time, but what was it like coming back?
I think doing that in your mid-20s means that there's not a lot of changes when you come back, especially after a year. People are pretty much doing the same kind of thing. So it wasn't too bad. It was a little bit of a challenging time to come back, though, and find a new job and get reintegrated over this side. But being able to do that, kind of knowing that I was back home, made it a lot easier. And just being able to secure that first job, I think, made it much easier to be able to move on from there.
Yeah. So those challenges as a result of coming back or as a result of GFC?
As a result of the GFC.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was just a timing thing.
Yeah. Okay. What things did you go through for the challenges to overcome those for finding a role? Was there anything specific that you had to do or had to do differently?
I think it was a lot about confidence. So if you go to a few interviews and you don't get them, that starts to weigh on you. So I think being able to put that aside and just know that it's not you, which is really hard to do, and say, actually, I'm going to walk into the next interview and try just as hard as the last one.
Yeah.
And maybe being a little bit more, I think when you go into interviews, it's really important, in my mind, to really want the job. If you walk in and you have this hesitation, or you think that maybe this isn't really the ideal job for me, I feel like they know that, the person who's interviewing you, and you're just not going to be very compelling and in the way that you respond to their questions.
Yeah, I think it is noticeable in like tone and body language and all the non-verbal cues. So yeah, I'd agree. And so you ended up steering into the role with IMED, right?
Yes, that's right.
So how was that?
So IMED was private equity owned. It went through some ownership changes in the time that I was there. From a day-to-day basis, it was just a great job for me to get into commercial. I worked really closely with our commercial manager.
Okay.
As opposed to, so even though I reported into finance, I had this dotted line into the CEO of that business and the commercial manager of that business. And I felt that really steered me on a commercial path of looking at things like, if you buy, so IMED is a diagnostic imaging clinic business. They own a number of clinics across the country. And so I looked after the New South Wales business, and you would go out and buy an MRI. So what's the payback period on something like that? It was just things that I hadn't really thought about commercially. So before, it was very sort of statutory financial accounting, internal controls, all these areas that you get a lot of experience coming out of chartered, that you then transition into a business and you do that. But being able to step away from that and actually do those value add things of, okay, we need to buy this asset. We need to go off and have these numbers of employees. How much does it cost? How does it work? I actually thought that was really interesting, and it kind of steered me in a path of definitely going down the commercial route rather than the sort of traditional sort of statutory side.
Yeah, sure. And do you think there was anything in particular that you took from that role that helped you for further roles going forward?
I think just that lens of working with people outside of finance
Yeah.
and knowing what they were looking for and why, like what value they could see out of you and being helpful on that side. So if up to that point I felt like I provided a lot of service to the business, but essentially worked a little bit on our own in finance. Whereas here, being able to be seen as value added a lot to my personal experience. And also I think I just really enjoyed it
Yeah.
more than the other side.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, and then you moved from there to Svitzer, and you're there for a pretty significant stint across a couple of different roles.
Yeah. So Svitzer is part of the Maersk group. And so they're within a big shipping conglomerate. And at that time they were owned by Maersk. They've now separated and become listed. But so during that time, I didn't, again, set out to become part of a shipping business. I didn't think a lot about industry actually at that point, but I just really enjoyed the role. I enjoyed being, again, sort of part of a commercial business. And I was there for 8.5 years, moving from different positions. So I didn't get too bored in that period of time until I moved up to regional CFO for Australia and PNG.
Yeah. So was it 5 roles in about 8 years you progressed through? Is that right? That's
Yeah,
pretty crazy. What do you think what would you attribute that to?
There was a lot of change in the business.
Yeah.
I think that was part of it.
Yep.
So acquiring, growing, getting bigger. And so that allowed my role to change and get bigger too.
Yep.
And also for the last few years before I became CFO, I had a really great regional CFO who took me under his wing and really helped me kind of develop my skills and also support me in taking those new roles.
Yep.
Which I found to be really key when you're taking a new role. It's really important to make sure that the manager that you've got, you can see them supporting you over that period of time, because it's not easy to take new roles and step up.
Definitely. But I imagine they didn't give them to you either. And so regardless of what change is going on, you must have been doing a good job. So what was it specifically, do you think, that led to you being so visible and being promoted like that?
One of the things that I both really enjoy and also have found has helped me a lot is in a way being very helpful to people outside of your team. So looking at more of a 360 view of your role rather than saying, I'm a part of finance, I support my team, but maybe I'm not so helpful to people outside of the business or outside of my team, or maybe I think really being supportive to, like, we talk a lot about sort of business partnering, that kind of stuff. That's part of it, but also being helpful where you don't necessarily see a reward straight away.
Yeah.
I think that ends up really supporting you and also helping you grow outside of your traditional finance role. So I think being part of a business that maybe is not so huge that you're siloed into your role, but that you get to step into different roles or get to support other teams, all of a sudden then people want you to be there. They want you to be part of the discussion and be part of the decision-making process. And once that happens, then I think that it transitions into being able to be looked at for the next opportunity when it comes out.
Yeah. And so your kids were born during that period as well, right? So the full on of kids, the pressure of having to get wins on the board in a new role, that must have been pretty full on. So how do you deal with the stress, the pressure, the time management for one?
So during that period of time, my partner had our 2 children.
Yeah.
And especially during that time, there wasn't really a lot of parental leave going around.
Yeah.
So while she got time off, I remember for my first kid, I didn't actually get any paid time off. So I took off some time myself, but 2 weeks and I was back to work. And then for my second child, I think I got 2 weeks. And so then again, transitioned back to work after that period of time. I think that we've come a long way from that point to now, which I think is amazing and I'm super supportive of.
Yeah.
But in terms of timing and how I managed it, I think I just didn't have a lot of time to think in that period of time. So between kind of working, trying to do my best at work and trying to be my best version of a parent at home, I didn't really have a lot of time to think. And I think that's part of the reason why I stayed in an industry like shipping, which I don't feel a huge passion for.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do. Shipping is like a very interesting area. We had people who would come to work every day and then spend their weekends taking photographs of ships and containers and all that kind of stuff, which they loved. It just happened to be something that I didn't feel a strong passion for. And so I think that's what kind of led me to staying in some ways for so long.
Yeah.
The fact that I was so busy between the different roles and the progression, but also the fact that I was so busy at home.
Yeah. So there'd be new parents out there going through similar challenges probably right now. So what tips would you give? What advice do you give for navigating that period of 6, 12 months?
I mean, I think it's up to the individuals to kind of decide how their roles and their relationships work. So I think it's really important to navigate that for what works for you at home. So every relationship and every family looks different. And I think trying to mirror other houses, other relationships, it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think being a little bit forgiving on yourself as well. If you don't, maybe you have to leave work early because you have to do a pickup or a drop off, and trying to be a bit forgiving on yourself in the office when you can. And also trying not to burn yourself out by working all night because you had to take a day off to look after a sick kid.
Yeah.
I think getting that balance right
Yeah.
is really important for you as an individual.
Were there times where you didn't get that balance right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think actually so when I finished up at Spitzer, one of the reasons that contributed to some of my changes was actually, so towards the end of my time, it was the first lockdown.
Oh, right.
And I've been traveling quite a lot for work up to that point. So Spitzer has a lot of tugboat bases all around Australia. So going out to remote ports, I'm spending a few days for board meetings or other things that I needed to go out for. And so during that first lockdown, I didn't travel and I spent a lot of time at home, as we all did. And my daughter, who was about 5 at the time, said to me, "This is the best part about lockdown, that you're at home." And I think that was really interesting for me to hear.
Yeah.
And triggered kind of a change for what I wanted in my next role. So I actually went part-time when I left Spitzer.
All right.
And my partner went back to full-time. So I had a role that I needed a partner to be at home with kids. And I realized that I wanted to spend some more time at home, and I felt like there was a balance that we could reach. So she went full-time and I went part-time.
Gotcha.
For a period of time. And again, that doesn't work for everyone, and it's not financially practical for everyone as well. So it's not, again, that's why I sort of say, just it's something that worked for me for a period of time, but it's not something that works for everyone.
Gotcha. So your first CFO role, you were promoted within the business. How was that challenge? Because it's very different to moving within a business to across a business or coming across as that previous CFO. So what was that like?
It was really challenging.
Yeah.
So getting everyone to view you differently, and especially since I'd been with the business for over 8 years, there were people who saw me as my first role. And maybe they had been in the same role the whole time that I'd been there. And so when they saw me in this new role, I really had to prove myself and take myself out of the role that I had done previously. And also within my own team, I had people who were peers who then, I became their manager. And that transition was quite challenging. So I think it's really hard, and I think it's really hard to sustain for a very long period of time. But at the same time, when you look to move into the CFO role, it's not something that you can move across businesses for, I think, generally. So doing it within your own business is kind of the only way to do it. But then that period of transition is really challenging. And so, I mean, I guess the question out of that is then what do you do? What do you do to help that transition period?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with my team to really establish a sense of safety with them in terms of what role that I would play and what role that they would play and how I would support them. So I think that was really, really key for me, just to make sure that as a starting point, my team felt really secure.
Yeah.
But then also working with my peers and establishing the right kind of relationships across those, that was kind of a transitional period for me.
Yeah, gotcha. And so now that you've kind of done both, going CFO within a business, but then also moving across CFO, what do you think is the biggest challenges between the two, or the most bigger differences between the two?
I think when you walk in and you are the CFO, there's already a sense to, like you're already established
Yeah.
as a CFO. No one sits there and says, "Let me have a look at your resume and
Sure.
how long have you been a CFO before,
Yeah.
or what are your qualifications?" They assume that you have that role, and that makes it a lot easier. I have found to move into new businesses,
Yep.
whereas moving up can be quite challenging in that way.
Yeah.
So you do need a lot of support. Again, as I sort of mentioned, you need managers who support you in that transition, and you need to see them as someone who can really, guide you, or also just support you in knowing that actually there's going to be a transitional period.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair. And so you said you moved to the Get Up role that was part-time. I'm always interested in part-time roles because they rarely are actually part-time. You always end up doing way more hours than you need to. So how did you manage through all that?
I think that actually GetUp was very good at managing
Oh, good.
part-time, and that's really important
Yeah.
taking a part-time role, because I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging if they've just taken a full-time role and made it part-time. So even though I did replace somebody who was doing the role part-time, I was able to kind of support around myself. So
Mm.
I went part-time, but there was someone in my team who was part-time who was happy to go full-time.
Okay.
So I made them full-time.
Perfect.
And I had to essentially play a different role from the CFO previous to me, in terms of saying, well, I'm going to have to be a bit more high level because my hours are reduced. And I had a CEO who's really supportive of respecting my hours. And also I had a team that respected part-time. So at GetUp, there was a lot of people working part-time hours.
Yeah.
And I think that made you very conscious of, okay, I'm contacting people at this time. Is this their day? And I imagine not everywhere can do it that well.
Yeah. And so they not for profit or for purpose or something similar?
Yeah, so they're a
Yeah.
not-for-profit
Yeah.
organization. So they're a political advocacy
Gotcha.
organization that's predominantly through digital. And that's a big reason that I wanted to move over there as well. So shipping has this reputation of being a little bit slow and clunky. And I was also part of a global organization where change is slow,
Yeah.
just by its nature.
Yep.
You couldn't just get up one day and say, hang on a second, I want to change the system that we have in place. It was slower, but I think I didn't appreciate that until I left and realized how quickly other organizations should go.
Mm.
So getting into a digital business, one thing is the speed of the work that you're doing, but also the speed of change that you can implement.
Yeah.
So you kind of only limited by your ability to deliver on new things rather than being limited by a process or
Yeah.
a system. There's a lot more sort of trial and error in terms of you try it, it doesn't work. That's okay.
Yeah.
You just try the next one.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was really interesting.
Going from a super corp, or not, maybe not super corporate, but pretty corporate environment to much smaller, a little bit more messy, or a little bit other things not going on. So how do you make that transition without the broad corporate support structure around you? Because you can get a little bit institutionalized in larger businesses like that because there is so much there. So how did you work through that?
I think that so the first day that I turned up at GetUp, the person that opened the door for me had no shoes on and was wearing shorts. And I thought, okay, this is going to be different. Like they told me it was going to be casual. They
Yeah.
said, do not turn up in a suit. But I was like, wow, that is a level of casual that I hadn't seen before. So that was really fun, actually. But having worked in a really big organization, I feel like you learn a lot of best practice.
Mm.
You don't learn necessarily if you come up through smaller businesses.
Yeah.
And so that transition from big organization to small is not for everyone, because you are on your own and you do have to make a lot of calls on your own. And you have to, take a little bit more risk and responsibility on yourself. So I totally respect that there are a lot of people who don't enjoy that, but I really love it. I
Yeah.
think that the organization size between 50 and 150 is my favorite place to be, just because of the fact that you can move so quickly and that you can make a lot of decisions yourself. And as scary as that can kind of be, having worked in a big organization and seeing how they did it and how I could apply that, I feel like it really established all of for me.
Yeah. And it must have made that style of environment must have made the transition to Mamma Mia a lot easier too.
Yeah. And again, I was really, really interested in going somewhere that was different.
Yeah.
And so going to a place that was founder owned and run was something I hadn't done before. And that was a level of speed that I had never seen before in my career. So GetUp was kind of a good transitional period. We had a board, it still operated and, with some sort of roadblocks in place. There was no roadblocks at Mamamia.
Yeah.
If you walked into a meeting and you presented an idea, then someone would ask you the next day where it got to. So you needed to know that anything that you presented, you were prepared to go with straight away.
Yep.
The fact that the business if you're running podcasts and digital media, it's every day.
Yep.
So you're managing traffic on websites every day. You're looking at podcast listens every day.
Yep.
Somebody's pitching a new podcast every day.
Yep.
And so you are constantly forecasting and reforecasting to see what that looks like, because it's really challenging to build a budget on that basis. And then it's also really interesting to know, actually, how do you forecast for a podcast that hasn't been launched yet? How do you know how many people are going to listen? And how do you know how much an advertiser is going to like that?
Yep.
So it was interesting in a lot of the modeling that I got to do on the back of that, and a lot of the assumptions that you got to put into it, and having the right kind of tools to allow you to do that was really important. So that's some of the stuff that I implemented when I started there.
Yep.
So the combination of needing cheap tools, which is what any small organization needs, but also ones that are, interface really well, quick, easy to use. You don't need, we just didn't have the capacity to have a 6-month implementation.
Oh.
I didn't want to hear anything that was an implementation over a couple of weeks. It just wasn't going to happen.
So from a technical standpoint, how do you go about building that forecast when there is no visibility or very limited? How do you go about it? Or what steps do you take?
I have found that in digital organizations, the information is there. They're gathering it because they're interested in it anyway.
Yep.
So it's more, how do you draw conclusions from it?
Yeah.
So how do you pull this from this system, and come up with something that will allow you to forecast for going forward?
Yep.
So, whether that's $1 value per listen or $1 value per person who has subscribed to the podcast, you need to come up with these kind of metrics. And be able to use those to project off of them.
Yep.
And so it's not an exact science. And so you need to, but the thing is, if you have history, if you have a business that has been around, that makes it a lot easier. I can imagine that if you were just launching a new podcast in a new structure, that would be its own set of challenges. You have to take a bit of a gamble, and you have to back yourself in that, know that if you make a mistake, you have to start again. You can't be afraid you can't spend a lot of time, I think, in developing something that then becomes useless the second that you do it. You need something that's completely adaptable, but also subject to change.
Yeah. And content businesses are a bit chaotic as well. So the environment itself, what was that like just as an office space?
It was, it was so much fun.
Yes.
So it was working with an entire company of extroverts. Which I hadn't worked in before.
Yeah.
Just it was so loud at points where I couldn't hear people sitting next to me when they tried to talk to me.
Yeah.
And even though actually I've looked at my own personality score and I'm considered to be an extrovert, they made me look so quiet in the office. That was kind of a running joke that we were really quiet. But it was fun as well to get pulled into different pieces of content. It's not a natural space for me to live in.
Sure.
To put on a character or play a personality, but every now and then I would say yes. So they would always constantly be on the lookout for talent. So, can you be in this video? Can you do this? Can you be in this ad? So one time that I did say yes, I was in a Donut King ad. And it was so interesting just to get your hair and makeup done, to be on a set.
Yeah.
Do all that kind of stuff. But my acting skills required just me sort of lifting my eyebrows. And so that was it.
Yeah.
So that was okay.
Okay. A one eyebrow number, like The Rock, or?
Oh, both.
Yeah.
I just had to look surprised. But when they were in a group of people and they said, who can look surprised? But I think my face was just surprised. So they said, you can do it.
Perfect.
Yes. So it was really fun.
Yep.
And everything kind of about working in an office that's constantly producing content is really fun. I think the only thing that's unfortunate is the number of videos that I've ended up in the background in just trying to type and do my job.
Yeah.
But you never know what expression you have in your face when you're in the background of a video.
Yeah, gotcha. And then So then that finished up and you've just recently moved into the role with Beforepay. So very, very different transition again. So you've done it a couple of times. So talk me through that.
Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily looking for a role
Okay.
when the before payroll came up. I was having a pretty fun time at Mamma Mia and I wasn't really thinking about an endpoint. I thought there was a lot of growth still to come at Mamma Mia and a lot of really exciting things, which I still think.
Yeah.
But this before payroll came up and the CEO, Jamie Twist, he reached out and I started to look into it. And actually the process took almost a year where we were talking back and forth and thinking about different things across the business. And it was a really interesting time because you rarely get to join an organization knowing the person that you're about to work for.
Yeah.
And so it gave me a really good opportunity to find out a bit more about him, find out if he had a style that I got worked well with me.
Yeah.
And I also got to meet the leadership team before I came across a couple of times too
Okay.
over that time. So it just felt like I was, as much as I kind of started on a particular day, it felt like I'd known them for a very long time,
Yeah.
which I've never done before.
Yeah. So a year's a long time. So how many meetings across that period?
I mean, it's very quiet in the middle. So we
Oh,
had a couple of
okay.
meetings at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then they decided actually not to go forward with the CFO for a period of time
Yep.
and have their general counsel step in as a acting CFO for a period of time.
Yep.
And so that seemed like a natural break. And again, I was working fine, pretty happy. And so when they asked me again, though, I really had to think about it because I didn't know if the timing was always right, and I
Mm.
think that's a really hard thing to work. And I mean, you never know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I just thought that this opportunity in a growing listed like fintech was just something that wasn't going to come up every day.
Yeah.
And I felt like they were on a trajectory that was really exciting. And the main thing that I thought about was, would I kick myself for not taking the role
Yep.
in a couple of years? And I just felt like I had to take it.
Yep.
So I moved across.
Yeah, sure. So it's been what, 3 or 4 very different industries each time. So I've seen a lot of hiring managers have lots of resistance to people making that transition, and business as a whole are typically pretty hesitant with it. So what advice would you give to someone that is trying to make that move across a different industry?
I think you have to be really patient
Mm.
with that.
Yeah.
And you have to work out what your priorities are. So a CFO of another organization actually said to me that what you should do when you're thinking about what role you want next is to write down honestly your top 3 priorities, and you have to be honest in what those are. So not the person you want to be, but the person that you are. So is it that you want to change industries? Is it that you want to work for a listed company?
Yep.
Like, what are those things? And I think that you need to prioritize the top ones rather than trying to get the full list sometimes. So it could be that you want to work for Canva, but maybe there could be a transitional point to get you to there. And so that could be the point that your entry point into that industry. So the reason why I made some of the changes that I made was because of particular choices. So I said at Mamma Mia, I was actually really interested in working for a founder. I'd never worked for one before. I wanted to know what that could be like. So as much as digital media was really exciting, it actually wasn't on my list
Okay.
of
Yeah.
somewhere that I specifically wanted to work for. So I think that, yeah, being honest with yourself and being honest with the list of what you think you can get is really important.
Yeah. No, good advice. And so what have you walked into? Like what's the scale of the business now? What's the structure, team, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's a $40 million revenue business, and we've got about 50 employees.
Okay. Yep.
So it's across finance. There's just a handful of us
Yep.
sitting in there. So it's like this interesting balance of, we're a listed company, so we have all this compliance that we need to do. And as I kind of mentioned before, we have to release our results quarterly.
Mm.
We have to do investor webinars. We have to turn up to investors and pitch and repitch
Yeah.
our business. So it's got this level of work, but at the same time, there's not that many of us to kind of cover off on a
Sure.
lot of these things.
Yeah.
So trying to be clever about the way that we use our resources, the tools that we have, the AI, I sort of cringe even as I say it, because all we talk about is AI,
Yeah.
but, can we use the tools at hand and the automation to make sure that we're being efficient with the people in our teams.
Yeah. And so that transition again from because the startup scale up space is a little bit chaotic, but with the listed component to it has to be a lot more structured too. So how do you get that balance right?
It's actually not as chaotic
Okay.
as I thought it was going to be. I think that I've got a great team who've worked in chartered and are very structured in the way that they do it.
Yep.
We also contract out where we need to and make sure we get support in areas that we don't have an expertise in.
Mm,
So it's not as chaotic as I thought. And it was actually one of the things that I've really enjoyed about getting to know our CEO. He's if you look at our results, they're not sort of like just straight up.
sure.
They're very nice transition upwards. And that's because of being very careful in the way that you kind of manage the business to not, hire 20 people and, all of a sudden you're at a point where you can't pay your bills or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think we're very targeted in what the future looks like. We're not chasing every potential opportunity. It's just the ones that we think are the most valuable and most important.
Yeah. Cool. And so what does that look like then for the business? I know you probably can't share a huge amount because of the listed restrictions, but what does the next few months, 6, 12, 18 months look like for the business?
Yeah. So we've got two businesses. So we've got the Beforepay lending business,
Mm,
and in there we're looking to expand our product offering.
yep.
So we have a pay advance product already out there at the moment,
Yep.
and then we have a personal loan product that we're just launching now. So the main difference between those is the dollar value
Okay.
and duration. The pay advance goes up to $2,000, and personal loan goes above that $2,000 limit.
Gotcha.
But the way that the business has been built is on the back of this awesome tech and machine learning. So there's a lot of sort of data science that's gone into working out whether people can repay it and how much they can repay,
Mm,
issuing loans on that basis.
yeah.
So we're taking that technology and into a business called Carrington Labs
Okay.
and looking to launch that over in the US. So we've had a few wins over in the US, but that's the real thing that's super interesting, in particular for me coming over and knowing, okay, part of the reason that I wanted to come over was because I knew that this could be a big thing in the industry. And it's just something that doesn't exist out there right
Mm,
now. I feel like lending in particular in Australia, it's very sort of stock standard in the way that it works.
yeah.
Nobody's looking to change the way they do it.
Yeah.
And the fact that this business was set up for the purposes of both making it cheaper for your customer,
Mm,
but also just automating it in a way that's fair.
yeah.
Have a person there kind of deciding, oh, actually, I'm not in a good mood today. You're not getting a loan, as opposed to going, actually, can you repay it? And is this a good loan to give you?
Yep.
There's a lot of really predatory businesses out there that make their money from charging huge interest rates and getting you into a cycle of debt. And that's not what our business does.
Yeah. And so how do you anticipate your role will change over the next 12, 18 months?
There's a big investor relations part of my role,
Yeah.
which is really interesting, where we've hit this point. So we're at over 100 million capital, and that has opened a lot of doors in terms of people want to talk to us now,
Mm,
which is great. So the business has come from a point where it's been about 16 million. And so the fact that we've gotten up to this point has meant that having those doors open and having those opportunities is really interesting. And I think that'll form a big part of my role.
yeah. Cool. And so from a broader industry perspective, what do you see happening out there over the next few years?
When you look at where we've been in the last few years, I mean, when you look at actually my career,
Yeah.
and when I started, like one of my first jobs was in accounts payable, where I'd get invoices in the mail and I'd get these colored bits of paper and I would staple it to each one of the invoices and I would take them and put them in someone's in tray and they would sign it and then I would take it back. And, like this incredibly manual process where I learned so much from being embedded within that process to what we're talking about now, where everything is automated. Now we get an invoice, nobody has to touch it.
Yeah.
It can be read, it can be go into the system, someone can approve it. Like you don't see a piece of paper, you don't see anything.
Mm.
until the point that it gets paid. So I feel like the speed at which we're moving is really hard to predict. There's no way that at that point, kind of 20 years ago, I would have known that we would be here.
Yeah.
So for us to look forward and imagine what this could look like is really, it's really hard to know. But the main thing is kind of jumping on board with changes and not living in your day-to-day job and saying, well, this is the only way, this is the way that we have to do things, but thinking about, okay, what's out there? How can we make things better? How can we improve things?
Yep.
I think will be huge for finance in particular. The bit that's probably a bit more worrying is what happens to new kind of graduates coming out there when they don't have these kinds of jobs where they can learn from a base level. How do you jump into the middle? If the whole beginning is automated, how do you all of a sudden jump into value add? I think that's a real challenge for new people kind of coming in.
How do we work through that? Any suggestions?
There's probably a role that unis and learning can do to make it's just different. Like the way that we learned how to do things, where we learned it from a base level, is probably not as practical as saying, actually, how do you use the right tools to give you the right outcome? Even watching, so our data scientists and the way they can produce things, they can use AI to tell them the code to then put into the into the data science models. And so they're now getting paid for getting the right prompt as opposed to knowing how to write the code anymore, which is actually really hard too, to know what the right prompt is and ask them questions. So I feel like similarly for our industry, how do we embed that in uni, and how do we create these jobs as well as a starting point for grads that teach them those particular things?
I think it'll just play out in time, right? I don't think anyone really has the answers just yet. It's just a wait and see.
Absolutely.
But I've really enjoyed your time. I think the way that you've transitioned through industries and continued to add value and continued to keep moving forward has been incredible. And I think the listeners will get a lot out of that. And I think the next couple of years for the business sounds pretty exciting. So I think it'll be a couple of big ones for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So if anyone has any questions for you or wants to reach out, are you open to having a chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
What would be the best way to get you?
They can reach me on my email.
Yep.
So laavanya.pari@beforepay.com.
Yep. We'll add that in. Perfect. And we'll appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on the CFO Track podcast.
Thanks, Tom.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the CFO Track. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with a friend.